Hello, everyone. We are back for our final meetup in the realm of this EASUS in November because we'll be back in December again and regarding all these wonderful topics, how we are dealing with our lives. And I mean, December is not going to be such a blooming kind of topic. It's going to be around grief and loss. But again, there are some of us that come into these discussions in December that will showcase the grief and loss of self, meaning we are still here as who we are and it's moving into that. But before we get there, today is actually a great connection piece on how to move into those because we're talking family gatherings, as for some of us are celebrating Thanksgiving, which is tomorrow. For a greater majority are going to celebrate some holidays, including Christmas and other religious gatherings around this time. And that's where challenges come up. We talked about it not last week, because last week we had Swati, who actually shared her cooking skills with us in the Ayurveda realm, which was so beautiful. I felt like I was on TV and hosting a cooking session. It was really, really fabulous. So for those who missed it, please go back. And she would have been here today, but unfortunately she couldn't find someone to take care of her son for the time being. So she'd be maybe popping in with some words like she did last time. So moving back to what we did 2 weeks ago with the two lovely ladies here, we were talking about numbing and people pleasing. And connecting these dots to today on how we show up in family gatherings, that can be part of how we show up. We might be show up because there's been some stories in the past that conditioned us to how we show up in our families. And sometimes that's one of the reasons we are not around family so often. I mean, here myself, I am further away from family. So I don't have these regular gatherings, though I do remember those gatherings when we did have them when I was younger around Christmas. And it was quite a disaster sometimes, at least at the beginning until you get into it. And then it's like everybody wants to have it perfect. And it's just that time we have to come together and be loving and caring. And it just has to be this way for this 1 hour, right? For these few hours. And we know that that's not how we function. And so there is where a lot of this conditioning in my personal experience come from, because we have this feeling like something is happening, something special is happening, and we have to show up a certain way and we can't be ourselves. And so I really want to just dive into the different topics on how do we show up within ourselves, and then how does it shift when we show up within our families? Does it change? Do we have challenges within ourselves when we do show up because we want to stay ourselves? Are there conflicts that come up? Anything in this matter will be discussed in this room today. So if you're here live, please share with yourself what are your experiences, whatever someone is sharing that you can relate to, or something that you can't relate to but you have a different experience, and just see how it all comes together, how we show up as individuals. And well, my name is Raditya Lazari. Once again, late into the game. I'm from Mindful Being, but again, this is just who I am. This is not so important to me because we are here to just share who we are from the heart, and that's what matters. The names and everything else is just an add-on. It's just a description of who we are, but this is what I created. And thank you for both of you being here this month. Diana, for being here for 2 months straight. Thank you so much for the support. So I can't wait for Diana and Amanda sharing their stories and their experiences, especially Amanda, who's actually in her family home right now. So let's find out the real deal. So welcome, both of you.
Thank you. Well, I guess I'll just jump in since you just mentioned the fact that I am with my family now. I'm currently at my mom's, and she left for Costa Rica yesterday, or no, on Monday. Time flies. So I have had a little bit of space to myself, but I have been home with my family for a week and a half now. And Yeah, it gets a little challenging and tricky because I'm very used to doing my own thing and having my own space. And so when I stay with my family or whatever, it's like you always have to kind of alter how you operate and that kind of thing, because you have to be mindful of the other people in the space. And yeah, of course we can carve out our own and have our boundaries and carve out our own time and operate the way we need to, yet you're still sharing a kitchen, maybe you're sharing a bathroom, like who knows. But and when I stayed with my sister one night because I mean, I wanted to, but I was sharing the room with the baby. And so she wakes up. She's actually so good, but she wakes up and she just will sit in her crib for an hour, maybe even longer by herself. It's actually amazing. My sister's very lucky, but they have the monitor and they can hear her every morning. She just wakes up and just starts babbling, talking up a storm, hugging her little bunny, talking to her little bunny, and she's not quiet. So fortunately, she slept in a little later the night I stayed over because there's a spare bed in her nursery, so I always sleep there. And it's really an adorable way to wake up, but it's usually earlier than I'm used to. So, just a little example, and that's a nice one. But it's interesting because my mom actually just brought something up to me about conflicts that she's been having with my sister. And I was shocked that my mom even brought this up because she and I used to have a very tumultuous relationship. And she said something, and I can't remember her exact wording, but she said something to the effect of, well, you and I used to fight all the time, and now I don't know what happened, but it's not like that anymore, and it's much nicer. And she was like, but Hannah, oh gosh, I don't know. Like, it's just, she's she's just so not sweet to me. I was like, okay, yes. And I just took it all in. I took it all in. And just for perspective, when my mom and I mean, for years, I'm the older one as well. So we had our own issues, but when it came to issues my mom and my sister had, my mom would always blame me for those issues as well, because I was the older one and my sister just did whatever I did or thought however I did and, agreed with whatever I said. And I was like, and this is not that long ago that she said this the last time. And I was like, but she's her own person. She's an adult. She does have her own opinions. This isn't because of me, but she refused to listen. So it's an interesting dynamic that I've been experiencing now because I mean, to be clear, I've done a lot of the forgiveness work. And as frustrating as it was, I just chose to be the bigger person, I suppose, is another way of putting it. But I don't want to sound condescending or whatever. But she had said to me at one point, well, I'm as old as I am. I'm not going to change at this point. So she was basically telling me if anything was going to change, it was my responsibility. And she would have blamed me for not like getting over it. And I'm not going to dive into all the traumas that happened when I was a child, but this traumas, they are traumas with a big T, traumas with a little t. And what has helped me, forgiveness is a tricky issue, but what has helped me, and somebody sent me a video by some Indian guru just yesterday, actually, and it was talking about karma, but it was basically totally in alignment with how I view forgiveness. Is it's not a condescending kind of energy, and I think I may have brought this up the other week, but it's really about seeing the other in self and the self in other, and that puts you on equal ground. So the forgiveness is really about forgiving yourself and forgiving the other. So it's forgiving self as much as forgiving the other person. Because if you look at relational dynamics, it is always a two-way street. And we can say that, especially with parent dynamics, which are very tricky across the board. I'm not trying to deny that. And I do also believe that it is more the parents' responsibility, especially when they have a young child. Of course, it's the parents' responsibility to show up and show unconditional love, but so many of us are so wounded. We don't know how to do that. And so we are doing our best. And that is what I have to keep reminding myself, is that my mom is doing her best. And once I was able to zoom out and say, oh, she has been operating from her own wounded child her whole lifetime. And I'm triggering stuff for her. And she doesn't see that, obviously. But I have been doing all this work. So I am now in a position to recognize what this pattern is, recognize what is going on. And as hard as it is, as unfair as it seems, I just chose that I didn't want to live with that resentment anymore. I didn't want to live with that friction anymore. And it has, I'm not going to say it's completely gone, but I have to say, like, the last year or so, and yeah, I don't live near my mom. I'm not seeing her weekly the way my sister is, because she goes to babysit my niece once a week, which is really nice. But my sister has ways of parenting, and so that actually brings up quite a lot of stuff. But yeah, so it's like, I had this conversation with my sister. I was like, listen, it's not fair. It's really annoying. It's very frustrating, but it may just be that, like, you have to step up and be the bigger person at this point in time. And what I was really surprised by, when I was having that conversation with my mom, we were driving to my sister's, and I reminded her of that time that she said she wouldn't ever change. And she was like, oh, well, actually, lately I have been kind of taking a look at my past. And I was like, whoa, this came out of the blue. And I had figured, I feel like my mom has calmed down a little bit, to be fair. She's in a new relationship, new marriage. And I felt like he calmed her down. In a way, and he gave her some kind of stability, and I don't even know, whatever it was that she needed, she's finding in this relationship, which is wonderful. But it turns out she's also actually been doing a little bit of the work, and I was curious, like, what spurred her to do that? I don't know. But she had, the night before, kind of brought up something about her childhood, and I was also shocked about that, because my whole life she barely shared anything about her childhood, which, once I had, like, not even like biographical, like, I had a couple biographical details, like, oh, she was born in Chicago or Evanston, and then moved to Weston when she was 5, grew up in that house, was in the majorettes in high school, did drama, and then became a singer. Like, that's kind of all I knew of my mom, as, like, her history. I didn't know anything about her dating life. I didn't know anything about whether or not she partied or anything like that. I never heard stories. So once I started doing this work, I was like, that's a red flag. So now I still don't know, but she brought up something voluntarily about, like, when she was a little girl. And I was like, oh, wow, I don't remember her talking like this in the past, like, ever. And it wasn't anything super, super profound, but the fact that I even noticed, I was like, whoa, this is a shift. And yeah, so what I will wrap this up. Sorry, I know it's I've been going on for a while now, but what I want to say is that I think a lot of it, our particular dynamic, she clearly has a lot with my sister still. So it's not like she's done all the healing. But I think a lot of our dynamic has shifted because, yes, I stepped up and shifted the energy between us. And then that has encouraged her some way, subconsciously, I think perhaps is a layer here, that it kind of, she is choosing to step up now. She is choosing to be a little bit more open. So that I'm hoping will also trickle down to my sister, lead by example kind of thing. But yeah, I'm not saying anything is perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but the shift has happened recently and it's very, very real for me. And it's really, really relieving. And I don't agree with my family on a lot of particular issues. So yeah, like there's still like big issues that are happening in the world right now. We have very different beliefs, but yeah, at the end of the day, things have shifted a lot, and it's not easy, and it was a lifetime for me. But it's possible even for people who are older. Like if you start to shift your energy, it will impact the way they show up 9 times out of 10 at least, probably.
That's beautiful. That's I'm sure Diana can add a lot of things to what you said. They were very clear. So yeah, Diana, please.
Yes, well, I agree with you, Amanda. And as being a parent, I'm very conscious about all the things that parents do that can affect their kids, and how the kids probably will either resent them for or be angry at them for, and even how conscious and aware we even are. It's like part of this evolution. They will still find things that we did wrong, because we are human beings, and as you said, we are wounded ourselves, or even not wounded, but we are at the level of consciousness where we are when we are doing these things. And when hopefully, as we talked last time, we are growing slowly, you know, being more aware and conscious and changing our behaviors. But during the and our kids are our greatest teachers, as we talked before, in the motherhood. So yes, they trigger us really much, but if we learn, as I said before, try to see those triggers as a learning moments, try to see those triggers as a moment for us to go deep inside us, as see them as a mirror and look inside us and say, okay, why am I triggered? What is it that gets triggered? Then you kind of start to grow, and hopefully, and I know it's possible, you minimize these future conflicts. They will not disappear. There will still be things coming up, and our kids will be angry at us. Definitely, it's like more thing that I know it will come, but somehow I think I will take it, hopefully, with more ease and calm. And I know, yes, I know I messed up there, and I did this, and this is showing up now in your life 30 years later. I'm sorry, but yeah, I did my best at that time. Now I know it was wrong. And I mean, that's the best thing that we can do as parents. And as you said, it's beautiful that your mom is doing the work as well. And as I agree with you, when I started to do my work with myself, actually my husband, my kids, and my parents and everyone kind of aligned. The thing is, with me, I was always adapting and pleasing others. So in a way, for other people, I was probably more nice and fun to spend time with before. So as you talked, Raditya, during these family gatherings, we always had fun and nice time, because for us it was always, you know, getting along, having fun. We didn't have so much discussions, and you know, everything was fine. But as you said, we all had these masks, I mean, or rather roles that we played. You know, no one wanted to disturb these beautiful events. And since I moved from home when I was 15, so when I came home to Lithuania, I was there for maybe a month or a few weeks in a time, and stayed in my parents' home for that amount of time. So it got very intense. And I know it was like a celebration for my parents every time I came. So they were really happy and everything was fine. But when I grew up, got my husband, and then some, you know, we started to see this dynamic, and I realized that I had some things that maybe were not so positive and good. And especially when kids were born, it's like, maybe it's not the best way to parent them. And then I realized it came from my own upbringing. I was sometimes irritated and angry at my parents, and sometimes I discussed and took these issues up when we were at home, and maybe even in a more angry manner. And I know that my parents felt it was really uncomfortable, and then I realized I didn't like this angry energy, and then I actually put it down and adapted again, and started to be more quiet. So I mean, all these things, you know, when we adapt and do things, they feel like as disease, since disease is the theme of today. So yeah, I realized these things as disease in myself partly as well. I felt like I was putting the lid on later on, and then because my parents were not happy at me when I was angry, they said, we don't recognize you, why are you, you know, doing like this? And I was like, but I'm putting my boundaries now, you know, and stuff like that. But they were really loving, really happy, and they just, you know, they wanted just to have joyful energy. But then as I started with conscious parenting and my own healing and my own realizations that my parents did the best they could, and they really did a really great job. They were really loving and caring. But as all, even loving, caring parents, they make things that kids, they understand it in a different way, and it becomes a wound, even though it wasn't meant like it from a parent's side. But kids, they perceive everything from their own perspective. And so, which I probably did, because my brother, I talked to him actually just a few weeks ago when I was there, he didn't have the same view of our upbringing compared to me. You know, I had depression, I was burned out and so on, and he didn't have any of this. He just looked at life totally differently. He worked differently. He reacted to things differently. So what I realized when I forgave myself, and when I forgave, you know, the parents, as you talked about, and this realization that they did the best they can, and they still do, and it's much easier then. But it's funny because like a month ago, a few weeks ago, I was at home, and it's like, it was so clear for me with some behaviors. It's like I thought I analyzed everything in my behavior and my parents' behavior and how I parent my children and so on. And I still can find things when we sit and discuss with my mom. It's like, wait. Oh, that's why I'm so nervous about this stuff. I'm not talking exactly like my mom. Even though I thought I was very conscious, there are still things coming up. It's kind of funny. So that's my share so far.
I'm just laughing because I could clearly hear it. And if I'm not mistaken, I think we're all the oldest in the family. You're not the oldest? You're the younger one? Okay.
I'm the younger one, but I was living in Sweden with southern Sweden, in Swedish family for 4 years when I came to Sweden. And I helped to take care of 4 other kids. So there I was older. So I think I took over that role, kind of.
Yeah, because whatever you're speaking of, you know, being more outspoken and like rubbing maybe against the grain in a sense, right? It's usually, I felt like that was because I was the older one. I didn't have anything to like, you know, compare myself to. And so I was just doing what I thought I was supposed to be doing. And but like Amanda was describing her relationship, or what she noticed with her sister is like, when you have someone younger, they look up to you and they copy paste, even though they're own being. But then when they're younger, they don't know that. They're just part of who you are. So I just felt that was coming up. But one thing I have to just bring in right now, as we all know, Swati wanted to be here. She did do a write-up, and I cannot kid you how connected people are, because here it goes. She just has a title about the holiday and stress around family gatherings, and she begins by saying the word is adapting. And this is what you like. We started with forgiveness, right? We got to forgive, and then we adapt. And let's see what Swati is sharing us about adapting. So the word is adapting. I have learned over time that no one will change for me, no matter how much they love me. People are fixed in their ways and mostly very rigid. The antidote to anger and stress is love. Love heals anything, everything. Ayurveda says a sattvic person, a balanced person, has universal love for everyone. The world is one family. Ayurveda says, looking at the things through a wider perspective, just like a wide-angle lens, rather than focusing on a minute details, a macro lens, one can ease the stress of getting overwhelmed and go with the flow. Now, this is all sounds easier said than done. So what can we do when we are in the midst of a family gathering or dinner and that strong feeling arises, the feeling of not being loved or not being good enough? First, we invite this emotion and make it our guest. Let it happen. Sometimes if you are bold enough, sharing the emotion with the family is not a bad thing. Validation always helps. However, if you know that your family will never validate, then give that love to yourself. Stepping away from the dinner table and getting some fresh air will help. Do not think with the fight, flight, freeze brain. Do not react. Let it simmer and settle. Then think logically and act. Life is not meant to be a pathway of roses. The name of life is navigated through the storm while holding on to your fragrance. Know yourself better day by day. Your strength is in knowing you and being authentic. Most importantly, showing up. That's your strength. And when you feel strong, happiness follows. The feeling strong and happy, Swati. So thank you very much, Swati, for again these beautiful words. And what I can hear from what she's saying, connecting to what all we are saying, is that the better we know ourselves, the easier these connections become and these gatherings become, because we know our place. We know what we are working on, what we need to work on, and how we influence each other. And what I loved about the part that Diana brought up, and also Amanda, is like when we change, they change. And this has been really my way of trying to embrace all the difficult things that are coming up, to realize that if there is something challenging, which just happened yesterday, and like they almost happen every other day sometimes, and sometimes there's like a whole month of nothing, and then you're like, oh, I think I'm fixed. And then all of a sudden it comes back and like, hold on, maybe I was ahead of myself. And so yes, we can always get caught up, but we are changing, we are moving in the direction, and the people around us are moving too. And what it takes is time. We cannot expect that by changing ourselves, constantly focusing what else we can do, that everybody else is doing it at the same speed. We are moving in the same direction together, and yet everybody at their own times. And so it can take years for people to get to that place, as Amanda shared with us. It can be moments of a spur where we just get it, and it's just right there. And one thing I just learned the other day in regards to trauma is that the trauma is the opposite of life, which is flow. When we're in flow, we're living, we're in the movement, we're natural beings. This is how we're here, right? Everything is flowing in our bodies, from blood to water, anything. As long as it's moving, it's going in the right direction. The moment it stops, there is stillness, there's staticness. Something's not right. Something has to be adjusted. We talked about food, we talked about medication, right? That can maybe hinder us to do this, hinder our bodies to actually be that way if we're taking in something on a regular basis, which I learned yesterday in regards to, I found out about some kidneys, function that wasn't normal. And so with that, it's like, okay, there must be something happening in my body that is hindering that process of being at the right speed or whatever. I don't know what that is, right? It's very new, so I can't tell much about it. And so what I learned about what this gentleman, Thomas Hübl, was saying was that the moment we're in trauma, things are stopped. We are stuck. So when you feel stuck somewhere, that means there is something you want to attend to so you can get back into flow, figuring out what is stuck. And sometimes it might take weeks, years for that stuckness to be less stuck. It's not meant to say that when you're stuck, that life is not moving along. It's just there is maybe one part of our lives that might be stuck. So when we have these family gatherings, like for me, it's similar to what Diana was talking about. It happened like I'm there for 4 weeks, and usually it's actually very like easygoing. And I was sharing last time when I went to see my parents in October, it was like the last moment when there was something I wanted to do. I had specific ways something should be, and other people didn't function with that, right? And so the lesson I learned, and what I also heard from all of you, is that everybody is different. Everybody is its own, and we too have to figure out who are they as much as we want to find out who we are. So I want to just have you all share a little bit more of what you heard, what you've seen, what else came up for you.
Okay, I have like 80 things I would like to say naturally. But yeah, the whole trauma versus flow idea, 100%. So what, going back to the fight, flight, freeze response, it's the freeze response. We learn about fight or flight often when it comes to like the stress response, but we don't learn about the freeze response. The freeze response is where the trauma happens. And if you think about it, fighting or fleeing, that you're actually releasing the energy. You're physically releasing, like, or like running away. Like, you're physically releasing the stress response from your body. In the freeze response, it gets stuck. And that's like the seed of disease, in my opinion, that stuck energy. And if you think about the energy of feeling stuck in your life, you're not in flow. The opposite of life, right? Yeah, you're not living your life fully. And fear can do this. Fear paralyzes us. So whether you want to talk about trauma, you want to talk about fear, it has the same effect in our body. And that is very much what's happening in the world right now. And that suppresses the immune system. It keeps people feeling stuck. And the more stuck you feel, the more hopeless you feel, the more hopeless you feel, the more helpless you feel. So it is a spiral going down. It is not a good spiral to be stuck in, or you're just in the spin cycle. So it's either, if it gets bad enough, the disease will take hold and it will suck you down that spiral. Or you're just going to be in that spin cycle going round and round in circles, the merry-go-round, whatever you want to call it. And life is just going to be pure monotony, and you're going to lose all sense of vitality. And then eventually it will bring you back down that spiral. So it's very, very important to recognize that what you're saying, like this freeze response, this being stuck in trauma, is the opposite of life. It is the opposite of flow. And another word that comes up in relation to trauma response is flexibility. It's the opposite. So when you're stuck in trauma, you're nervous system. I wanted to say immune system. I was like, no, it's not the immune system. It's the nervous system. It gets stuck, it gets rigid. You have this response. Think about feeling triggered. You react and you don't really have control over that. There is no flexibility in your response. So a trauma response is very rigid. It is it's related to being triggered and just reacting without being able to take a step back and respond. So flexibility is super important, or building that flexibility, releasing the stuckness so that you can be flexible in your response. And that gets back into awareness. So if you're triggered at the dinner table, shame, blame, anger, frustration, resentment, whatever these emotions are, rather than having the typical pattern of reacting and getting angry, and then, oh, the typical holiday family dynamics are back now, yay. Rather than having that be the pattern again, if we can pause, take a deep breath, bring some mindful awareness to what is coming up for us, and then choose a little different. Doesn't mean that person is right. Doesn't mean that you can't address it later on when you're in a calmer state, but at least you have avoided that same pattern, that same triggered response. And now you're on the path of shifting the patterns and shifting into more of an upward spiral. So the spiral dynamics is really something that has been coming up for me a lot, because it's not like, it's not linear, but we can choose to shift up a level. And this is getting back into the levels of consciousness, which I think is a really important layer to consider, especially when we think about generations. Collectively, our consciousness levels are so much higher. So it is actually incumbent upon the younger generations most of the time to actually take up the torch and start to shift the patterns. And as unfair as it seems in the moment, we have more awareness of all of these layers of psychology and trauma and collective wounding and all of this, that it is actually, I don't want to say easier, but we have more tools and resources at our disposal, more knowledge, more wisdom to lean on. And it is true to a degree over time that we can become a little bit more fixed in our ways, that change is a little bit more difficult. But that doesn't mean it's impossible. Neuroplasticity, all of it, and we can, heal the trauma, release it from our nervous system. But by and large, I do think it's actually incumbent upon the younger generations, in fact, to show up and start doing the work and start standing in unconditional love, because we have more awareness than they ever did. And we are ostensibly a bit more flexible at this age compared to 60s, 70s, whatever. But that doesn't mean they won't change, and they can't. Look at what I just shared about my mom. I was shocked. And who knows where she's going to be, but 10 years down the road, not, expecting her to be like all of a sudden enlightened or anything like that, but, little steps of progress. And then we can bring that karma to future lifetimes, and that gets easier and easier and easier. And yeah, I just wanted to also bring up the idea of being sensitive. I think if we're extra sensitive, a lot of times we take, like Diana, you were saying, you and your brother had completely different views on your upbringing. I think sensitivity is a superpower, but it also makes living in this world, this 3D reality, that much more challenging, because our world is not built for sensitive people. So we are more attuned, we are more sensitive to these perceived slights or wounds or whatever. So I think having a lot of compassion and grace for ourselves along this journey, and also for others, the compassion and grace just keeps coming up for me over and over again. Look at the way our society is very polarized right now. Having compassion and grace for the person who has the other view, allowing for discussion and debate rather than canceling them because they disagree with you. Compassion and grace allows us to see the other point of view, even if we disagree with it, to actually hear it, to sit with it and say, well, I'm not going to talk to you ever again because you're automatically an awful person if you believe this way. That's what's happening a lot in our society. I think that's the worst thing that could possibly be happening. And that comes down to family as well. I have a friend who is not invited home for the holidays, and it's really, really sad. And, he understands why, because his family's operating out of fear, but it's still not easy, and it's very heartbreaking to hear these stories. So it's this, now more than ever, we really have to be extra mindful of having these other perspectives and leaning into compassion and grace as much as possible for ourselves and for the other. And also recognizing that, everybody is a mirror. So if we are reacting and getting triggered, that it's showing us the path to further healing. It's actually a gift in a way. It's like, oh, there's still something there. Okay, how can I now process this layer? So it's never ending. But yeah, there's so much I could say.
Yeah, thank you so much, because I think you made these beautiful connections between fear and compassion, and that fear is always somehow, somewhere, right? And so it's a question on how do we meet it? So that's what I hear you say as like the things that you shared. What I take out and connect together is the two that you said at the end. Diana, what do you have to add to this? I mean, if she had 80 things, I'm sure you got 80 to add.
Yes, well, I do, but I'll try to keep it short. Thank you. That was beautiful, Amanda. And there are so many things I didn't even know. I don't know where to start. But first of all, yes, it's about this taking a pause that you were talking about and taking a breath. That's what I, that's all about me. It's what I was talking about in Spiritpreneurship Summit also. This learning to know when you can take a pause and just breathe, and also this insight that another person is actually just doing the best they can from the place where they are at. It gives you this kind of compassion and understanding, and then the relationships really get better, because you, even if you get triggered, you try to see that person as a teacher. Only that it's like, okay, I'm get triggered, that person is a teacher, instead of thinking at that person as your someone who's trying to hurt you on purpose or something like that, because that directly the dynamic ends. But if you see that person as a teacher, okay, I get triggered and that person is angry, wonder why that person is angry, probably that they have their own wounds, but it's triggering me as well. Interesting, why? And of course we don't, sometimes when we are tired and stressed and like my parents and mom and sometimes can say things, I can still get triggered and still get really sad. But now I can easier stop myself, take breaths, because it not always works, and then if I take a while and think about these things, I realize, it was just her old wounds talking, because I know, because I talked a lot about it with her, because I have that opportunity to do that when I'm there for so long, where it comes from. And then I get better understanding and compassion for her. And this relationship just grows. So it's kind of beautiful. But I also loved when you talked about this fight, flight, and freeze response, because I was in a fight in a way when I was stressed and I was working, but also when I was depressed, I was in total freeze response, and I was just frozen, and a lot of fears came up, and it just put me into this downward spiral, or sometimes I was there and then downward spiral into deep depression, and my body just shut down. So it was beautifully put, and it's so true. And yes, the one thing that helped me out of that spiral was part of forgiving myself, starting to love myself again, understanding that I am, as everyone else, a human being, because I had such a high expectations on myself. And that was part of why I was kind of angry at my parents for some things, because when I realized, but they unconsciously with love did this to me, and I was angry. But when I actually released it, and I said, but it's not only them, there are circumstances in life that did it too. It's just that they did the best they can because they love us so much and they wanted to do things like that. But even though it turned out not so well for me all the time, it wasn't really meant to hurt me. It meant to do something beautiful. And this realization, forgiving myself and them and everyone around me, and just started to see everyone as my teachers, and just shifting the view that they are not out to get me, they are not out to hurt me. Because as you said, as a sensitive person, I put a shield on, and I acted as I was tough and strong, because otherwise I would die in financial world, was trying to make a career in finance. It doesn't work. So I adapted. I put, a mask, and I was strong, and I was outside, but inside everything hurt, and I saw everything, and everything just, it was a big wound. So yes, so healing, understanding oneself, going back to your own self. There have been so many things just helped me to heal, and these relationships in family, that we all are different, and it's actually beautiful. And just try to see that, and that we all perceive things in so totally different ways. So just a funny story, when me and my husband went to a wedding trip, our honeymoon, for 3 months in South America. When we came home, and just a few years later, we were talking about it, and it's like, oh, do you remember this, when we were eating this beautiful food and this meat? My husband was talking, and it's like, no, I don't remember. But I remember when we went to this beautiful hike and these beautiful mountains, I told to him. He's like, what? Where? No, I don't remember that. And that showed such a beautiful way how different we perceive the world. And even though we are so different, yeah, and we had some conflicts, we still can live together, you know. But I mean, it's a work in progress when you realize that, yeah, we see things differently, we remember things differently, and we function differently, but it's okay.
I love this story. You know what the beauty is of your story is that it gives you the full perspective of your trip, because if both of you would only remember the same things, you're missing out all on the other things, because you can never remember everything. So it's great to be around other people. The one thing that I was thinking of when we were talking about, luckily there are people that are not like us, is when you're standing in line, you have 5 cashiers open and there is one line where nobody's in line and everybody's in the line where everybody else is standing. You know, it's like, that's the one I was thinking of. It's like, luckily we're not all the same, you know. And there's so many other examples, but yours is much better than any I can think of, because it really is. Because when we see the other person for who they are, and I was just thinking about this about my mother a week ago. I think something happened at our dinner table where I had a flashback of me growing up, where you shouldn't be loud at the table, you shouldn't be singing or doing this, you know, you should be just eating, do the things you're supposed to do. And there was a moment where I was like, no, that's not what I want. And it just had such a, like, that flashback was so real that I had to remember how grateful that I was for my mother being able to raise us as for who we are. She never changed us, my brother, myself. She always saw us for who we are. She never actually wanted us to be a certain way. And yes, she wanted to teach us to be a certain way when you are surrounded by other people who live by those rules. When you are in society that sometimes it's just better for you to just do this, just to do it, and then go on and do your own thing again. So that there are times that you don't always have to go against it just because it doesn't follow yours. It's sometimes also okay to just, well, look at it. It could be a sense of forgiveness, right? Just forgive them and say, like, okay, I'm going to do it. It won't change me. I'm still myself, but I'm just following these rules, like stopping at the traffic light or whatever those other rules are that are put down to make us be safe, or whatever the reasons were, and finding a way to be ourselves in that. And when I noticed this, I really was touched just by seeing our parents as a opportunity for the things that we did do well, the things that we do learn, because it's always easier to find things that we disagree on and that we can say, like, well, they didn't do this, why did they do that, this is why I am like this, to actually also see the other side. The reason why we can be this beautiful in this world, sharing the world the way we see it, is because they were able to give us this. If we are maybe driven to be successful in some way and noticing, well, that's not really all of it, like I have to balance it out with something else too, we were learning certain ways that support us, that help us to be able to survive in this world, so that we can have a job or maybe be in a field that we feel totally welcomed in, that we can be ourselves. So I think, like, for me, for instance, my dad is a very organized person. I'm very grateful and thankful that I have these tools, because I don't know how I would handle my household if I wasn't this organized, right? And so it might be more technical and more, you know, like underlying. It's not really supporting my, well, actually, no, it's also supporting my mental being, because if you're organized, you're mentally also a little bit more organized. So either way, there are also things that we can find in our parents that they did beautifully, that they, even though that's all they knew, whatever we're taking away, there are endless things that we can point out that made us who we are today, because we can't be sitting and standing here if it wasn't for them. we wouldn't be existing if it wasn't for them. And so there are so many things to be grateful for in that matter. I mean, talk about Thanksgiving, thanking and being grateful for those things. I mean, this is what came up for me a week ago, and it connected my mom and me once again. We had a 2-hour conversation after I shared this with her, that I had this enlightenment about how wonderfully she was able to let me be who I am. I don't feel ever in my entire life that I had to fit a mold. I was always allowed to be myself, and that could only happen thanks to her. And these are not my last word. My last words are that Swati Rahatki has been here watching. She's been saying how we connect so beautifully, and she loved the trauma versus flow. And so I just wanted to give a shout out to Swati watching our conversation, and just saying hello to whoever else is here later on. And yes, you can share one more thing that you want to just conclude your experience of this month, disease, and letting go, letting be, forgiveness, and just welcoming new opportunities.
Amanda, can I take this one before I forget? Yeah, because it was one more thing I wanted to say. That's you remind me, Raditya. Gratefulness. Grateful that we have this. I'm writing every evening what I'm grateful for. I had a hard time when I was depressed, but now my list is long, really long every night, and introduce my family. So we are doing it every evening by the dinner table, and it's really shifted the energy. When we started this, the whole the dinner table is so much more peaceful and beautiful and more positive. So that is trauma. I'm listening now at Mate Gabor. It's a Canadian physician, was working with a lot of addicts, so I really can recommend his books. And I'm listening to a book about No, and where he also thinks that I also agree on, that a lot of our diseases come from traumas in our lives. They don't have to be big traumas, small things as we as kids perceive like something maybe totally different than we in our bodies, and get stuck, and it can lead to diseases. So it's a really good book. That's
Yeah, I'll just follow up with saying, yes, gratitude is super powerful. And what I love, so I talk a lot about gratitude. I have over the years. It's a huge part of the foundation, I believe, in shifting. But what I love about it is that there's so many studies that actually, for the logical science data-minded folk, the left-brained type, there's so much data proving scientifically the power of gratitude, how it improves relationships, how it improves health, how it improves business, how it improves everything. So if we get back into a conversation we had the other week where we were talking about the different frequencies, gratitude is the threshold. It is what elevates us into the higher vibrational states. So gratitude is a very powerful practice. It is the threshold that allows us to activate self-healing once we're in those higher vibrational states. To bring it back to the whole disease idea, dis-ease, if we're not feeling easeful in our mind and emotions, that is where dis-ease comes into play. And so gratitude brings us back into this space of openness, this space of compassion and grace and love, to get back to what we were saying before. So it's super, super powerful. And yeah, I mean, it's the perfect timing to be talking about this because tomorrow is Thanksgiving. So yeah, Diana, like you were saying, I think it's a lot of people, I think, get lost in the original meaning of the holiday and the original intention, and maybe not completely, but yes, just to reiterate the importance of really considering what you're grateful for this holiday. And yeah, hopefully going around the table, if you are sitting with family, and starting the conversation with what you're grateful for, it can hopefully ease whatever tensions or just shift the dynamic in a more loving direction. So yeah, I guess that's all I want to say. And thank you again for inviting me to be here. I love these discussions; they're always so fascinating. And I'm sending everybody so much love and light and gratitude in this holiday season.
Thank you, Amanda. Thank you, Diana. Swati says she loves us and happy Thanksgiving. And it's just so true. You know, I mean, I love these conversations. This is one of the reasons I wanted to create a panel discussion, because I've had lots of one-on-one conversations through my summits, and I realized how much more there is. And it really is blowing my mind every single time, especially having Swati as the writer on the side who actually isn't here, and yet it all is connected. I mean, it's just to show that there is power upon us that we don't even know exists. And so let's have more conversations. Let's be open. Sharing with heart is where we begin. Thank you for everyone showing up today, being here with us, and share whatever your takeaways are from here. And so thank you, everyone, and see you next month.